doing all of this. Okay. Kishan, can you turn on your camera?
Did that.
Suchitra, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Very good afternoon to everyone here.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Suchi. How are you doing? Good to see you again.
Hey, hi, Dallas. Very good to see you.
Looks like many of you know each other, so that's good.
Yeah.
Kishan, can you turn on your camera, you think?
Ramsa, I think we can start.
Start. Okay. All right. Trying to see who else is going to join. Okay. We'll start with the group that's here. So I hope I'm audible and visible. Okay. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar. There are a few more people few more panelists that are supposed to join, and we'll bring them in as they join us. What I thought we would do is to first start with self-introductions, a quick round of introductions as to who we are among the panelists. Okay, and I would appreciate it if you would keep it brief. Okay. Just to start, I'm Arkalgud Ramaprasad. I'm Professor Emeritus from University of Illinois, Chicago, and also working in Bangalore as the director of the Ramaya Public Policy Center for a while. So I'll be facilitating this. I'll just go down the list of names as I see it in no particular order. Dr. Helen Crompton, would you like to introduce yourself briefly, please?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Helen Crompton. I'm a professor of instructional technology, and I'm also the executive director of the Research Institute for Digital Innovation and Learning, and that's in Norfolk, Virginia, in the US. Thank you.
Dr. Shantanu Chakraborty, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Shantanu Chakraborty. I'm a neuroscientist, and I head the life science program at Atria University.
Thank you, Dr. Chakraborty. Dr. Kishan Reddy, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, I can't seem to get my camera working, but I'm Kishan Reddy. I was formerly with Jawaharlal Nehru Technology University, Hyderabad. We have 150 affiliated colleges. So I'm retired from service. So I'm eagerly listening to what's going to transpire here. Maybe carry some of the thoughts back to the university.
Thank you. I don't think Dr. Gopal Krishna Joshi has joined, right, Anupama?
Doesn't look like it. We're just confirming
okay.
if Naveen Krishna BR, what appears as Naveen Krishna BR is
okay.
ID.
Well, in the meantime, we'll go to Mr. Dallas Krishnan. Dallas Krishnan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dallas. That's how I'm addressed. Based out of Bangalore, I head Coursera's India business. So I have about 30 years of experience behind me, 27 years of them in technology companies, and then the last 3 years at Coursera.
Thank you, Dallas. Ms. Suchitra Kolluru, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm audible.
Yeah, you are.
All right. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, once again. I'm Suchitra Kolluru. I'm a part of Microsoft. At Microsoft, I manage the channels for education charter for them nationally. The views I'll be expressing today here with all of you esteemed guests will be more personal than Microsoft's point of view. And thank you for having me.
Thank you. Dr. Ramkumar Rajendran, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ramkumar Rajendran. I'm an associate professor at Education Technology Department at IIT Bombay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Gopal Devanalli, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Gopal. I have a technology background, worked at Infosys for 15 years. Last 8 years, I worked with the Manipal Group, which has healthcare institutions as well as several educational institutions. And I'm on the administrative side, on the education side.
Thank you. Dr. Rija, would you like to introduce yourself? And turn on your video too. Yes,
Hi
please.
everyone, myself Dr. Rija, Professor, Program Chair, 5-year integrated course. I'm from Bangalore Institute of Technology.
Thank you. Dr. Manjinder Kain, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, thank you, everybody. I'm Manjinder. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Grade, which uses artificial intelligence to reduce assessment and feedback workload.
Thank you. Mr. Santosh Kanekar, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. My name is Santosh Kanekar. I am heading Atria Education. I've been 30 years in corporate and consulting after IIM Calcutta. And this particular subject is of extreme interest to me because in the larger context for me, I feel educational institutions have ceded the place that they have in society to corporates in terms of setting the ideal and setting the high bar and setting the tone of conversations. So my attempt with this webinar is to reclaim the space which educational institutions need to have in at least hosting a roundtable where differing viewpoints can come together and we can shape views by which we can show the path which society needs to follow. And I'm saying it purely from a statesmanly perspective and not from any informed or any highbrow kind of a perspective on that. So really excited about this subject and look forward to the conversations.
Thank you, Santosh. Chetan, has he joined, Anupama?
Chetan has not yet joined. I think he will join in due course, but like he mentioned before, his video will probably be off.
Okay, Mr. Christopher Abel, are you there? He's also not joined. And then we have Dr. Balas Bodo. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly? Dr. Balas.
Okay. Thank you for the invitation again. My name is Balázs Bodo, and I'm a senior researcher, associate professor at the University of Amsterdam Institute for Information Law. I'm a media studies / economics person by training, but I'm working with information lawyers on issues of technology governance. In the next 5 years, we are going to work on how trust is being produced by digital technologies in the society and whether they are trustworthy to start with. And we are also in the middle of accrediting a master's program on technology governance, how to govern the digital technology infrastructures in our society from a multidisciplinary perspective. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion, learning about your perspectives and engaging with them, hopefully productively.
Thank you.
I think Christoph has just joined.
Okay.
So we'll just, yeah.
Hi, Christoph Abel. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly? Your audio is off. You're unmute. You're muted.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Cool. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry I'm a little late. I was just running to the hotel, had to check in, and there was a jumbo jet full of people ahead of me. So here I am. Okay, thank you for your patience. Hi, my name's Chris Abel, and my day job is entrepreneur in a blockchain company that we have for ESG assets and asset-backed tokens. But from in terms of AI ethics, it's I would say almost a lifelong passion coming from, I used to run the Human Brain Project in Europe, which is a very large initiative for computational brain science, essentially, and brain simulation. So we had a whole sub-project in that for AI ethics as well, or for brain ethics in this case, of consciousness. And I also founded an association in Paris called AIInIN, which is a nonprofit for to deal basically with business processes in the age of AI. And I'm on the founding board of a Springer journal called AI Ethics, where I also sometimes publish. And yeah, the most recent thing was about how essentially about intellectual freedom in AI research, especially on a corporate level, where we see some issues, and I think quite relevant these days. So thank you for inviting me and having me on this call. We really appreciate it, and I see some really amazing colleagues around the table. So fantastic! Thank you so much.
Thanks, Christoph. I think we have covered everybody, right, Anupama, on the panel?
Yes, Ram.
Thank you very much. What I'll do next is to give you a very brief introduction in the form of, it's essentially the summary of the concept note that I shared with all the panelists. And from there, we'll get into the discussion of the topics. It's going to be a free-flowing discussion. Okay, I'll be facilitating it, and then it's going to be moderated by Anupama. And so if you, I'll just share the screen with you so that I can go over the concept, and then we can get into the discussion. Is it visible, Anupama?
Yes, sir.
So the topic is AI systems in higher education, the dynamics of trust. And when we talk of AI systems in higher education, we are going beyond ChatGPT and some of the things that have been getting a lot of publicity, but there are a lot of other systems that work in the background, even from the simple spelling check to grammar check to searching on Google or searching on Scopus and all those types of things. So we are broadly talking about AI systems in higher education and what are the dynamics of trust. I must also acknowledge that it was Dr. Balas Bodo's paper and some of the things that sort of got us into this topic, and we owe a sense of gratitude to him for having initiated our thinking on this. Thank you very much, Balas. If I can, okay. Just to acknowledge, Atria University is part of the Atria University webinar on artificial intelligence systems. The sponsors are Mr. Kaushik Raju, who is a member of the Board of Trustees, and Mr. Santosh Kanekar, who has joined us, and he's head of the Atria group. The coordinators from Atria are going to be Dr. Anupama Sanjeev, who is the Assistant Director of Academic Affairs, and the administrators are Hazel Gomez and Abhishek. Those are in the background. Very quickly, I'll give you an introduction, and we have finished with the introductions of ourselves, and then I'll give you the framework. I'll go over the framework in terms of the ontology of dynamics of trust in AI systems in higher education. This is the way we have conceptualized the problem. And then I'll bring up the key issues for discussion, and we'll conclude with what is the plan next. The webinar administration, there are a few administrative details we'd like to take care of. One is, it's being recorded. We hope we have your permission for recording. If you don't want something to be recorded, just let us know. If you don't want your thing to be recorded, let us know. We'll turn it off at that point. And any reporting that will be done is going to be de-identified, so your name will not be associated with it. Permission for panel screenshots, video clips for dissemination. Again, this is Atria University would like to publicize this. So in the process, they'll be taking a screenshot of all the panelists. And if you don't want your picture to appear on that one, just let us know, we will eliminate it. Then permission to omit honorifics after the introduction. It gets a little tedious, making sure, keeping track of the doctor, Mr., Mrs., Miss sort of a thing. So if I don't call you by the appropriate honorific, please pardon me. Okay, so you don't also have to call me doctor. You can just call me Ram. I go by that name for most people. Panelist role is a structured mindstorming with moderation and facilitation. And there are a number of other people also that are simply observers, that they won't be party to the discussion. Panelists, please keep your video on if possible. That makes the facilitation easier for me, okay? And please signal visually. Visually means you just raise your hand, or you can do it virtually if you want to contribute, okay? If your face is not visible, if your hand is not visible, it makes it a little difficult to capture that you want to participate. Observers may watch and listen. And then group chat is available for both panelists and observers. Okay, but in terms of the chat, when I usually facilitate, I can't pay attention to the chat as well as the faces and the hands that are going up. So Anupama and others will be handling the chat, and if there are issues that come up, then I'll bring it up to discussion. Are you okay? Can you hear me properly? This is the framework that we have developed, we've been working on in terms of the trust in AI systems in higher education. I'll go through the framework to explain to you what we mean by this conceptualization. We look upon trust as it could be positive trust or neutral trust or negative trust. Positive trust is something like, yeah, it's true, I like it. But a negative trust is it could not be true. Is it right? Okay. Should we suspect something about it? And a neutral trust is something where we take it for granted. Often a lot of things we just take for granted, but sometimes when we have a doubt, it goes into the negative trust, or sometimes when it's something very reinforcing, it goes into positive trust. Now, in terms of that trust, we are looking at the students' trust in the AI systems, the teachers' trust in the AI systems, researchers, administrators, non-teaching staff, regulators, government, employers. All these people have different degrees of trust and different types of trust. And they are not necessarily overlapping. The student may trust something, or this is what the answer I got, but the teacher does trust. And then this trust can be with reference to education in terms of teaching, in terms of learning, in terms of assessment, and in terms of evaluation. So these are the various facets of education in which we have to consider the trust. But it would also be with reference to the research, the teacher's research or the researcher's research or the student's research, or with regard to the service as well as the administration of it. You know, in all these things like administration, in admission, for example, AI systems are coming in terms of selecting the candidates, selecting the applicants, and so on and so forth. The recruitment systems use AI systems. Now, the challenge that we are trying to address is, how do we produce these different types of trust? The principle that we are talking about is that all these three types of trust are necessary. It's not just positive trust or just negative trust. All three things are necessary to balance out the effective use of AI systems in higher education. And we need to be concerned about how do we produce this trust? How do we maintain this trust? How does this trust get lost and how does it get recovered? These are all dynamics of the trust that takes place in terms of the production, maintenance, loss, and recovery. And thus may happen through the structure of the AI system. What I mean by the structure of the AI system is it is centralized or decentralized or localized or universal. So when we have a centralized system, for example, it may give a universal answer just based on the English language models. All right. But when we have a localized system, it may have the local knowledge incorporated in it. Right? Similarly, the functions that it performs. When we talk about the functions that it performs, in addition to answering the questions and providing response to the queries, also does it provide cautions about it? How helpful is it? How does it guide you through it? All those types of things. And then the third one is the operation of the system. How does it operate? Where does it operate? Now, how easy is it to operate? How friendly is it? And then the issues that are talked about in terms of the governance and regulation of the system. Governance and the regulation of the system, governance at the various levels. It could be at the university level, it could be at the accreditation body level, it could be at the state level, national level, sort of thing. What are some of the governance issues and the regulatory issues that say that you may use it for this, you may not use it for this? These are the kinds of uses that can be put to. These are the kinds of uses it cannot be put to. So broadly speaking, what we are talking about is that when we talk of trust in AI systems in higher education, when we talk of trust, these are the multiple components of trust. And then how do we produce it, how do we maintain it, how do we lose it, how do we recover it through the design of the structure, the function, operation, governance, and regulation. Now, this is a framework which has a large number of pathways in it. Some of these can be illustrated, like it could be production of positive trust among students in education teaching by AI system structure. An example of that could be enhancing ease of use of the lessons using localized AI for students. Localized AI could mean local knowledge, local language vernacular. Increasing accessibility of the lessons using distributed AI for the students. Right? Similarly, maintenance of neutral trust among administrators in administration by AI systems operation. Matching of AI administrative recommendations to administrators' expectations. You have cleared a large number of applicants using AI system. Does it match the expectations, or do you see some biases in it? Or do you see something skewed? Providing explanations of AI errors and their sources in administrative recommendations. AI systems are notorious for not providing explanations. Neural networks, very good predictively, but very poor in terms of explanatory power. So providing explanations of AI errors and their source in administrative recommendations. Loss of negative trust among employers in education learning by AI system governance, providing comparative validation of learning outcomes using AI systems. So an employer may say, look, this university or these courses are very AI system based. We don't trust the learning outcomes of this one. Or demonstrating field validation of learning outcomes using AI system. Recovery of positive trust among teachers in research by AI system function, that is providing validation of literature search. Now, there was a case in the United States of a lawyer that submitted a brief where a large number of the references were made up. The citations looked perfect, but the citations were made up. Imagine a student submitting a paper, it looks perfect, well formatted, but the papers don't exist. Okay. And demonstrating validation of data analysis and discussion using research using AI systems. Many of you as instructors have encountered where the student says, oh, the computer gave me these results, or the spreadsheet gave me these results. But again, they may not know the underlying assumptions that are made. Okay, and therefore, consequently, the errors that could occur. So in the framework, there are 3,360 pathways. There's a combinatorial product. And each pathway may be instantiated in multiple ways. And there are thousands of ways to manage trust in AI systems in higher education. So this then is the overall framework that we're looking for in terms of what are the pathways that are effective. So how do you, as stakeholders in higher education, determine and reinforce effective pathways of trust? Right? Determine and redirect ineffective pathways of trust. These things don't work. These reduce the trust, and we need to determine them and change them. Discover and research new pathways of trust amongst the different stakeholders, and develop a roadmap for research policies and practice. AI systems, whether we like it or not, are going to be in higher education. But we will need to figure out what are the best pathways that we need to have in order for it to be effective, and how do we reinforce it. So overall, the question is, how can one design a smart trajectory for trust in the integration of AI systems into higher education? So that is the overarching question that we have right now. Okay. So with that, I'll stop sharing. I'll wait for a second. If you have any questions, I will answer them. If there are no questions, I'll stop sharing the screen, and then we'll go on to the facilitated discussion. Any questions, any comments?
Could I just again clarify on the negative trust? I wasn't very clear on that. Negative
trust is like very often when you use a system, they give you a caution. For example, if you simple thing, there's ATM in India, for example, they ask you to perform a digit check, enter a number between 0 and 100, see if that number comes up. So you don't take the keyboard at face value. So you verify it. So there is a certain sense of caution that you go through, right? Or for example, when you get a result from an analysis, you don't take it at face value, but you say, maybe this result is wrong. So that is the type of, so a sense of caution, a sense of guardrails, a sense of maybe this, because students, especially, and even researchers are likely to say, ChatGPT gave me this answer. But the negative trust would be, maybe the answer is wrong. Just like the lawyer's brief, the brief was very good, but it was a wrong brief. So did I respond to it, Gopal?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, sir?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Could you talk a little on when you say pathways of trust? While we understood what you mentioned about trust in AI, what are we getting to from pathways of trust?
What I get into pathways of trust is, suppose we take a student, this thing. Okay. Now, what we need to do is we want the students to use the AI systems effectively. So the pathways of trust is, how do we produce positive trust among students regarding learning, all right? By the design of this part. But at the same time, how do we produce negative trust among students in learning? Because I'll give you a simple example. Not AI, but in a sense, a little bit of AI. YouTube has a phenomenal amount of learning material available. Some of them are very good, some of them are okay, some of them are wrong. So when I mean by pathways of trust, I mean, how do you teach the students to discriminate between the good ones, the not so good ones, and the bad ones? Because all of them could be very well produced and it may look right. So did I answer your question, Suchitra? Okay.
Yes.
And it becomes more complex when you do a bit of statistical analysis. Something gives you the results, and then you ask the question, how many cases were there? How many variables were there? What was the degrees of freedom? The student says, I don't know. The computer gave me the result. All right. And they don't know enough to ask the question that this may not be the right result. All right. I hope I answered your question, Suchitra. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? No? Okay. So I'll stop sharing the screen. So let me start with a couple of people like Helen. You have done a couple of recent papers on review papers on trust in AI systems in higher education. And at least the way I read many of these papers, they tend to focus more on the positive side of things. And then as a caveat, put something like saying this may be shortcomings. This is my reading of the papers. Okay?
Yes,
so,
no, I'm happy to share that. So my first major one was a systematic review on K-12, and I covered both the affordances, the benefits, and the challenges. However, the paper was so large. When we came to do the higher ed one, we focused more on the affordances for the fact that it was just so large. However, we have multiple other systematic reviews. We also have a sentiment analysis, which goes very much into your trust, where we look at higher ed faculty and really dive deep into that. And the trust there that we're seeing, like you said, there's trust was neutral in the middle, as in not neutral, but it could go any direction. So they had trust for, yes, you know, this is great. We've got this great system, to the negative kind of side of this is not to be trusted because of all the limitations of the systems. But for me, what comes out is I focus on the very practical side, on the educator side, working with students and from the student perspective as well. And for me, it's education in all of this. There's a lot of misconceptions about what AI is going to do, and negative always sells. So people see things in the media and decide not to use it or to ban it or things like that. So that's very much a focus of trust. So for me, like I said, education, and going back to education, digital literacy for our students, how we're supposed to use technology, and whether the fact that we cannot trust any, but not in a negative way, as in we have to look and validate through various processes to find out whether it is correct. But that's just a few of the studies at the moment. I'm happy to put the citations in the chat. So I've got a lot ongoing at the moment to do with sentiments towards AI. So I can put some things out there if anyone wants to ask any questions.
Thank you, Helen. Let me shift to Ramkumar. I'll keep shifting based on the understanding of the background I have, but anybody else wants to speak, they can raise their hand, sort of thing. Ramkumar, you do research on education and interactive education and those and learning analytics and interactive tutoring systems. Do you have any comments on the trust in tutoring systems and those types of things in terms from the research that you're doing?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Ramaprasad. When we provide in the intelligent tutoring systems, when you're providing a personalized feedback to the learners, and what the current system lacks is why the particular feedback is given to the students, why the particular remedial content is provided to students, it's not clear. So we need to tell the student why we are providing the content, how we come up with this particular the remedial content or the remedial directions, and you should give a choice to the students, like the learners. They should select whether I should accept this particular recommendation you made to me or not. That is kind of missing in all current intelligent tutoring systems. That is actually the trust issue. You know, most students who are interested, they try interact with the systems. When they are not able to do well, the learning path changes. They don't know why it is changed. So yeah, that was my point. But thanks here, and thanks for. I'm happy to listening to others here. Thank you.
Can I follow up on that one?
Yeah.
Because the point, if I were to paraphrase it, is that the systems lack explanatory power. In other words, they say that they say this is wrong, and probably this is the way you can go, but they don't say why you are wrong and why you should take another risk. So you're also a computer scientist in the background, and are the systems, can the system design be such that they're capable of providing these explanations, or the essential nature of the underlying foundation of neural networks, does it prohibit from providing these types of explanations?
So I think you're right about the explainability. So the point is, systems are not capable to provide feedback if it is completely black box network. For example, neural networks, where we don't know which layer is giving what kind of output. But when we talk about the intelligent tutoring systems, the current system is, we have very few data. The data is about 100 students. We are not really using advanced deep learning tech for the ITS as of now. If you really look at all the ITS in the world, it's all rule-based systems, be it a Carnegie Mellon, CTAT, or MetaTutor, AutoTutor, or MathSpring, whatever ITS. It's all about rule-based systems. None of them even going to the traditional ML models. So we have ability to do that, but not doing it. That is the major thing. But yeah, if we in future, if we're able to collect a lot of data and we want to use a neural network, then we may not be able to provide the system. The transparency will be the issue, but I see the transparency as the three tier. The one is with the tech, the designers or the researchers, when they create a system, they should be a more I think they should have the more control, and they should have more power on providing all the transparent comment to the public, that is the end users. And that's the idea. So currently with the rule-based systems, we can provide the explainability, but we are not doing. In future, if the neural network will be using it, for example, to predict the students' affective states like emotions, confusion, or boredom, then we may not be able to provide why we say you are boredom based on your facial expressions. That is not possible. But giving a remedial content, changing the learning path, we can do it. That's a trust issue currently. Yeah. So I hope I answered your question.
No, you've done it very well, but you have opened up a lot more questions. Let me paraphrase and go to another person, sort of thing, because this is the setting of an enriches. On the one hand, you're saying that we have the capability to provide better explanation, better feedback and guidance, and we are not doing that.
Yeah.
In other words, we have the knowledge to do that. All right. So in a sense, put it sort of in crass terms, we are black boxing some of these things and saying this is the way it is, or this is the way it is, or so on. So
Yeah.
there's a capability is there, the knowledge is there, is not being incorporated is number one point that you're making.
Yes.
Number two, you're also brought into another issue, that is the affective issues. We can deal with the cognitive issues much more effectively rather than the affective issues in terms of the
Yes.
emotion, like, dislike sort of a thing. So that is something, that is a territory in which I think the systems really, we don't have too much knowledge or the ability to translate it into AI systems either. Am I paraphrasing you correctly, Rajendra?
I think the first point is very well. I think thanks for paraphrasing. I think I was thinking about many things here. The second point, we have the system in place to predict students' learner-centric emotions such as boredom, confusion. Most of the data is from West, like 1 million faces from mostly data collected from United States and Philippines. We are having effort to collect data from India and Japan and Korea started doing it. So we are able to detect the students' affective states like boredom, confusion, delight, frustration. Also, we are able to detect they're engaged, disengaged, are they discussion, are they interacting with the computer? Those things can be possible. We are using a deep network for this, for example, ResNet or YOLO, but those kind of deductions, we can't say why it happened. So we cannot go and tell student, hey, I think you are frustrated, you should read it. It's not possible. Instead, what we did, we tried to understand why the student might be frustrated based on the interaction data. Provide that, we use for example, we use that empathy message and that, hey, this particular question might be tough for most of the students, or this particular question had 60% of students are not able to solve it. Can you try again? Those kind of messages. So
great.
Yeah, that's the idea currently we are trying to do. Yeah.
No, so you're great. What you're saying is that being able to respond at the affective, emotional level could be a way of building up that trust or managing the trust in addition to the cognitive aspect.
Yes.
So, and there is some point, there is advances being made, but you also made up an important point. I think I'm just going to touch upon it and not, is importance of localization, because you said in terms of reading facial expressions, a lot of the data is Western facial expressions, not Asian facial expressions or Indian facial expressions. So the localization becomes important in terms of building the trust. Okay.
So I just want to add, I just want one point.
Yes.
What we really did is we have database from India, IIT Hyderabad, IIT Hyderabad, IIT Dalwar have a database of basic data for Indian faces. We use the databases today in our study for the class 6 students to provide an effective comment. We realized that system is not able to understand students' emotions because we never had a database of class 6 students Indian face at all. Now we are actually started collecting 50 students' data. Can we code it? Again, can I share the data to others? No, we have to, we cannot share the data because it's ethically not correct. So what we do, we hide all the biometric features. We convert that into, we use AI actually, basically we use AI and you take the expression features on the different seed image. And that's what we're trying to do. So I just want to add, not just localization, we don't have data for the different age group and not different diversity within India. Yeah, thank you.
I'll add particularization to localization. So it has to be very specific. It can't be general. So, okay.
Yeah.
Dallas Krishnan, from your responses, it looked like you have some things to say. You have lots of things seems to be going through your mind. So can I switch to you for a second? Okay.
Yes. Right. I'll probably step the discussion into more in the context of as a platform technology player in the education space. And
just to remind you, Dallas Krishnan heads the Coursera outfit in India. So, okay. Yes. So it's the online education. Okay. So, yeah. All right, go ahead, Dallas.
Thank you. So obviously AI has been around for some time, and it's been integral to any technology platform players like us, with the amount of data that we have, about 120 odd million learners. So obviously it's a treasure trove of data and insights that we get, sometimes on skills, sometimes on courses. And the usual thing that we've typically used is essentially to curate learning pathways based on skill outcomes that we see for various learners, right? But what we are now moving to, and this is probably an area where we say that, okay, now that the Gen AI and LLM as a power tool that comes in on top, how can that become as a key play in the context of what a learning platform can potentially offer students, right? And the community involves students, faculty, as well as the general learners, corporate professional learners. So one aspect that we focus on is in the context of what we call driving personalization and interaction at scale, right? When the usual form, when it emerged, online learning was a bunch of videos, and then that's all that people had in the context of what they could access and go through that. Over a period of time, when you had more information, you added assessments to it, you made it, made the videos more interactive. So those were a few things that happened. But the power that we today are working on is to say, can we bring in a personalized tutor in the context of the learner and the level of the learner that the learner is, right? So how do I map these two things? Different learners at different levels of understanding of a concept. In a typical scenario, if a student doesn't get a particular concept, what happens is that he needs to go back to something more basic to pick up that concept and then come back here again so that his learning progresses. So what the idea here is that can we get insights around this aspect and get those in nudges and learning material embedded in the learning process so that he doesn't have to leave that space, right? Make it more interactive. Think of it like a personal tutor that becomes available to a student or a learner of any type as he progresses. So personalization of that learning is one space that we feel the evolution of AI will probably come in quite importantly. And to your point on trust, I think that's the area where what data source that you use would become an important element in figuring out, can that tutor be the trusted tutor, right? And that's where one of the experiments that we do just use the expert content that a platform like ours, we have over 10,000 courses, videos, all sourced from expert content, right? It's not open content. So all of them are credentialed. So can we use that as a trusted source to build these experiences, right? So that's one aspect of the work that we're doing. The second aspect, which is predominantly in the aspect of design and delivery of education, and those are the other areas that we could do, especially in the context of faculty and university systems, designing course curriculum, enabling faculty to build their own, what should I say, a curation of videos which combines their experiences, their lecture, maybe a lecture from Helen or someone else, that combines together and makes it much more relevant to the objectives that they are driving, right? So there are a bunch of work that we feel these things can be accelerated. What would have been a very complex process can get accelerated and can get simplified. So these are couple of areas that we're today working with, the underlying philosophy being, can we look at the data source that is in that curated and gated that allows for it to be more trusted in the context of the use and the use case that I spoke about.
That was very good. And I'll come to Gopal in a second because he wants to make a point. But also I want to, when you talk of data source, and then what we talked about localization and particularization, those types of things, and data becomes a controversial issue, then after Gopal, I'd like to go to Balas because I would like to see whether he has some thoughts on the legal, political, and government issues related to that one. Because what we're talking about is a universal system, then we are localizing it, particularizing it, and that means it requires a lot of data. Then a whole bunch of privacy, confidentiality, security issues come up. So I'd like to see what Balas has to say about it. But Gopal, you wanted to make a point. Gopal,
Sure.
what do you like?
Yeah. So I'd like to talk about building trust for a model that we had created for predicting student outcomes. So the trust had to be created amongst the faculty, and of course the students and the administrators involved, right? So this was So we own a medical school which caters primarily to the US students, and we are obviously highly regulated. Our students are mostly from the US, so they have to write a couple of board exams. Some of you might be familiar with. It's called the USMLE, Step 1 and Step 2. And the students, if they don't pass USMLE Step 1 in the first attempt, their chances of getting into a residency drops. I mean, theoretically they can take it again, pass again, etc. So there's a lot of focus on preparing them for that, which typically happens after 2 years after they join the college. And the previous model was typically you get them to take a pre-test, see whether they're prepared, and then you get them to do it. But then we decided to create a model based on past data, past success rates, looking at a bunch of factors, not just on the pre-test, everything from, since they joined the school, and created a model. Obviously, there was a lot of skepticism whether this model is the right model or not. There was a lot of questions about explainability, Prof, like you said. The faculty wanted to know, why is this model predict? Why should we believe this model? So it is like you're absolutely right. So we had to work with the faculty first to kind of make sure that they understand why this model might make sense. And then being a machine learning model, it obviously went into once it got deployed, as the results started coming in, it proved to be a pretty good model, and the trust then built up. So the point I'm trying to make is sometimes the trust builds up in a system over a period of time. How much ever we prepare, we may not be able to do that upfront. So that was the quick point I wanted to make. And then the other point which you brought up is among students too. It's, as you're aware, a student can potentially, and especially in the US, can take us to court if they think that we're doing something unfair. So if they say, look, explain this model to us. Why are you not letting me take step 1? Though I've cleared all the requirements. So we got to be extremely careful. So we have to bring legal in. We have to look at how to create the policy, etc., etc. So it's a much more complex thing. One, it is good from a student perspective, school perspective, but we need to take into account the trust issues which were there within the faculty and the students and try to bring them around. We're continuing to build the model. We're adding more features. And that's when I think it'll get more difficult. Because as you add more features, we're trying to bring in features before they join the medical school, how they performed in their undergrad, what are some of the key features there. So the moment you try and add that, then I think explainability is going to get much more difficult. And there we're going to have many more challenges. So it's an ongoing work, and we'll see how it kind of evolves.
Thanks, Gopal. I'll go to Balas, and then I'll go to Christoph. Christoph, because I see in addition to ethics issues, you also enter mental and emotional intelligence, because all these issues have come up on this one in terms of the trust. So I'll come to that after Balas. Balas, you have a legal, political, and government perspective on this one. We are talking about, in today, countries have become very proprietary about the data, personal data, different places have different requirements. Do you have any comments on how all these things will affect the trust in terms of the AI systems?
Yeah, I would like to comment on a number of things that have been raised so far. The first one is your comment on the inevitability of AI in the higher education. I would be more cautious on that, because I don't like discourses which try to frame technology development or any change inevitable. I think we have a responsibility to fight a change which turns out to be detrimental for the individuals or for institutions that we cherish or for society at large. We should not treat by default a change inevitable. And we have the responsibility to actually ask these questions. Should we is this a change we want? And then if it's something that we don't want, then how do we fight it? The second is, I would like to distinguish a little bit between trust and trustworthiness. Trust is someone that I can have towards an unknown other. But what we are really talking about is the trustworthiness of an AI, of the use of an AI in the higher education setting. So the question we need to ask, are these systems trustworthy at the moment? And if not, how can we ensure that trustworthiness? Because ultimately what we want is that trustworthy systems are trusted. We don't want untrustworthy, bad performing systems to be trusted, because this, if we do that, we're going to end up as the lawyer that you raised in your introduction. That lawyer trusted ChatGPT to make sense, and then he's going to lose his business and livelihood, right? Students who trust ChatGPT to write their essays, they get bad marks. And institutions who deploy untrustworthy AI systems may lose their reputation, their standing, their students, their talent, their teachers. So we want to make sure that institutions who, as every higher education, every university has a responsibility, has a societal task to think in like horizons, temporal horizons that span centuries. Like as university educator, as a scientist, my task is to actually connect the dead with the unborn. I'm networking the dead with the unborn. I'm thinking in like terms of like several centuries of time span. These institutions who have been there for a really long time and which serve a really important societal function do not lose their societal standing just because they relied on a shitty technology. Now, the question then is, what can we say about the trustworthiness of these systems? What can, and like when we ask these questions, who are we talking about? And this discussion so far very quickly fallen into a groove which was trying to discuss like whether transparency or explainability of a model actually can increase the trustworthiness of an AI system. I would again be very cautious to reduce the trustworthiness question to the question of the model or the question of the algorithm, because what we are talking about is actually firms, business interests who develop these technologies, actual people, investors, CEOs, other people who are marketing these technologies. And I think when it comes to like who is responsible, whose trustworthiness we have to think about, these people, these organizations, these firms are the culprits. We should not let ChatGPT or OpenAI as a firm collect billions of dollars of investment and blame the algorithm. This is not the forward. So in that stack of like errors and mistakes where there is the lawyer who trusted the ChatGPT and then OpenAI gets away with billion-dollar investment, the lawyer loses their livelihood and the model is blamed. This is the worst assignment of blame and responsibility. So we have to think in terms of as an institution, as a higher education institutions, are our interests aligned with the technology providers? Can we ensure that our interests are actually aligned, that they, whatever they are promising, they are able to do, and then they have our best interests in mind and not theirs. And then we can start to think about, okay, maybe they are trustworthy, but then what kind of safeguards we can implement to make sure that they remain trustworthy. And in democratic systems, the most effective safeguard of trustworthiness is distrust. Paradoxically, we maintain trust in a system by not trusting any of its components, right? So we have checks and balances, we have division of labor, we have division of powers, we have oversight, we have transparency, we have regulation. These instruments are all instruments of distrust. They are all instruments of control. So, and with that I sum up, I would like to argue to actually approach this challenge not as like how do we increase trust in a system, in a technology with unknown properties, but rather what kind of system of control, maybe distrust, maybe regulation we set up in order to make sure that the university remains trusted and trustworthy when it starts to include certain third-party technological components in its own operation.
That's great, Balas. Thank you very much. That was a great point of view and a summary. Helen says she has a quick comment. After that, I'll go to Christoph, sort of a thing. Helen, your quick comment. And then Shantanu, you have been nodding your head. It looks like you're resonating with what Bala said. So after Christoph, I'll come to you. Is that okay? Helen, quick comment from you.
Yeah, very quick. You talk about faculty and whether we should integrate these things, with trust. You have to remember that higher ed faculty have all the expertise in their subject knowledge, but little to no education on how to teach. So they're gripping hold of what's always been done, lecture and things. So if you're we want to, progress and improve learning, that's something very difficult for higher ed faculty to do. They want to stay doing what they've always done. So they'll often say, no, let's put that aside and not do it, which halts progress. So we have to think about that as well. And I'm not speaking about higher ed faculty, sorry. It's just the fact that they're very busy. So they're holding on to what they've got.
I think also one of the things that Balas emphasizes governance and regulation, and that could be at very different levels, sort of a thing. So that may come into the picture. So, but I'll come to Christoph now, and then to Shantanu. Christoph?
Yeah, thanks very much. So I think from what we've learned a little bit from the corporate side, or from the corporate research inside of corporations, how the problems that we find there, I think there are some of these are actually also very much transportable to the institutional setting of higher education. What I think is very important is that we make distinctions between the different uses of AI, in the sense that we have, of course, in higher education, we have the use of AI in research as a tool, as a research tool. We have research on AI, basically as a subject matter, and building AI systems. But then there's also research directly on AI in certain settings, like, for instance, in higher education. And I think one first point I'd like to make is that the institution should look at itself very much as well. That should be an integral part of let's say the duties of an institution as a higher education institution, not least because the field is so dynamic that there needs to be an ongoing, almost like a process that goes in parallel to all of those other streams that are either using AI, deploying AI, or doing their own research on AI. So I think that's a really important point, this kind of dynamic piece, because if you think about ChatGPT like 2 years ago, that was, very specialist knowledge, even being able to distinguish between the different models, right? So, and this has changed dramatically. The second piece is kind of related to this. Deriving from this, I would also very much ask for education and sort of a continued education inside. And I think that's inside of the institution. That's also something I think Helen touched upon just now, is to make sure that the information asymmetries that are actually existing very strongly inside of institutions, that they are being addressed, and that employees, folks who are in teaching roles, but also students and administrators, are given the tools to effectively make determinations about AI, the use of AI. And that brings me to one other really important point. I think a lot of times it also is really important to see what is already there in terms of governance, ethics, data, privacy protection in the university itself, not even related to AI specifically, but what are the frameworks that are already in use, and how can they be adapted and upgraded for AI. There's a danger in creating a language that's kind of different from everything else and is just for AI, and then sort of it doesn't really fit into the existing frameworks and allows for some sort of arbitrage between different governance frameworks. And I think that should be avoided as much as possible, because it has to be, such frameworks have to have an inherent internal logic to them in order to be trusted and in order to be applicable. And I think finally, sort of as a sub point to this, it was also mentioned by others before, is sort of a transparency and disclosure. Again, not necessarily just like, okay, let's open up the algorithm and the black box. That can be quite complex and not necessarily helpful in the sense of like who understands this. But what's really telling is, well, disclosure of, let's say, of corporate sponsorship of AI research. What is being paid by who? Where's the money come from? Who makes the decisions on funding? And that would also lead to sort of the power dynamics inside of the institution. Are we looking at reinforcing structures? You know, let's say by you know, some of the mechanisms have been mentioned, you know, in terms of localization, but also in terms of using AI. And it's not the algorithm necessarily, but it's also what do we feed the algorithm? What's the algorithm trained on? What are the data sets here? And are they potentially reinforcing stereotypes maybe, or you know, positions, or even undetected sort of power dynamics that we are reinforcing, maybe without bad intentions, but with outcomes that are actually amplified, versus when you know, when you have a more human interaction. Yeah, I think these are the points I find interesting in this.
Thanks, Christoph. So, since you are reinforcing some of the points, you're making some new points, and also at the same time saying, let's not reinvent the wheel in terms of handling this. We may have governance and regulation structures that can help with, that can be fine-tuned to this. But also let's look at the source of where all these changes are coming from. Okay. But I want to shift to Shantanu. I think he was nodding his head earlier when Balas was talking about things, okay, and I want to listen to him. And then I want to go to Manjinder, because you are into assessment and evaluation. Ultimately, higher education institutions, all said and done, have to do assessment and evaluation, give a grade, give a diploma, or do something. So, okay. And then when the AI systems come into that one, how does it affect it? So, Shantanu, you have some comments to make. You have some thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I want to emphasize that, I mean, these are really the very early days, right? So, I mean, what we've seen, at least my opinion is that sophisticated systems should learn to engage with contradictions. And what I see in AI systems and the thinking about AI systems is that very often these are given short shrift. So I'll give you a couple of examples from my own teaching, and rather the behavior of my own students. So, for example, one of the things that we see in India, there's a high premium associated with the ability to speak a certain and write a certain kind of English. And we have a lot of students who come from backgrounds that are and who do not have the best language skills. And after ChatGPT, very quickly, they will write emails that are, or they will write documents, they will write emails, and they will write fairly technical as well as fairly accurate kind of English. Now, one of our learning goals is that students do learn about language. Right? Now, is the ability to produce language without actually learning to produce it on your own, is that true learning? And whenever you come to ideas like grading, when you come to ideas like commenting about learning, there are these comments about truth and that you kind of really have to make. So, for example, and I have not decided whether that is right or wrong. So if I have to penalize it, I mean, I haven't made up my mind if I should, because it does give these students an added advantage. The kind of the language skills that they have to pick up is simply impossible from the background that they come into. And from a point of social inclusion and equity, it can lead to good outcomes. But on the other hand, my own internal notion of learning is that you ought to be able to have some understanding, or at least you ought to be able to autonomously produce some of these ideas, right? Because we want thinking to produce thinking students. So the couple of things I think will come up even in your framework are, you will find that there are a lot of contradictions that are quite interesting in a sense that, so if you think back to economics, like Arrow's impossibility theorem, you might have a list of ideas about, say, in Arrow commented about the ideal democracy, that points 1 to 10 must all hold true, and you will find that often some of these points will not hold true, and all of these are desirable. And what does one do in a scenario like this, and how does one frame kind of the law and some of that stuff? So and I would add to that this idea of the machine taking you away from certain human interactions as well. So it has happened to me that I've sent students for internships to university laboratories far away from our home campus. And when the students could just walk over to their advisor and ask them a question, they would instead prefer to ask the question to the ChatGPT engine. Now, is that a kind of behavior, kind of pattern we really want to see? Right? I'm not saying I don't, but I was very struck that students will behave in that fashion. So I think there are a lot of consequences to AI, and it is in the contradictions that we also kind of have to focus. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Shantanu. That was very thoughtful and insightful. But I want to go to Ramkumar later because I want to sort of probably he can comment upon the two different types of learning sort of a thing. Well, is producing a good report learning or is internalizing it learning sort of thing. But before that, I had promised Manjinder. Manjinder, you have a comment on this, on the whole discussion that has been taking place in terms of the assessment and evaluation that you are into?
Yeah, certainly. I think the discussion so far has been incredibly valuable, specifically around the concept of trust and us having, as a society, making sure we're putting the onus on the people behind the corporations rather than just those kind of algorithms themselves. I think the concept of kind of abstractifying the onus onto an algorithm can be quite an effective tactic from a lot of commercial entities, right? So on that point, I want to be very clear about how we approach things. Like, I used to be an educator, right? So I've taught in schools, I've tutored, I've taught higher education students and all that sort of stuff. And the biggest thing that we realized is that to help with this transition, it's incredibly important to have an assistive process. So though you might be saving, though you could in principle do a lot of automation with a lot of these AI-based algorithms, the transparency that's required is incredibly important. Why those decisions are being made by your algorithms is incredibly important. That's why we have access to that decision-making data. That's just similar to what Ramkumar was saying earlier, how most of these neural networks are actually quite black boxes, but we do have the access to, with those decision-making logic tools to be able to give understanding. It's important for us to provide that understanding as a corporation from my point of view. But the other thing is the fact that we have a system of assistance. There's not a concept of being fully replaced. The idea is pretty simple, right? For us, while you grade the work, the AI is helping you by providing suggestions for feedback. And provided it's right more than it's wrong, in the vicinity of 80, 90, 95%, you do less work, but you still have, the final say. So you have this kind of human technology hybrid decision-making. And that's really important in the interim. Because when you think about how automation and tools and automations that other industries have been integrated, they weren't just, snapped in overnight. We think about these incredible machine processes where you can take raw material and fully automatically convert it into glasses and china and put all your drinks and stuff in it. And that's fantastic. But that was never how it didn't go from human beings doing it to that overnight. What happened was we added in different sections with checks and balances at each station with the appropriate oversight and improve the efficiencies of that process. The result is cheaper produce and a more valuable goods for everybody. And if we continue that analogy, if we integrate technology like artificial intelligence in an assistive manner, like we do at Grade, you can have a system where educators can create more content more effectively, students can engage and get more feedback more quickly and more effectively, and you have an entire educational ecosystem where not only educators are less overworked, but students are getting more personalized feedback, and we can, over time, remove the certain things as we learn more and more about these processes, provided we have the checks and balances, provided we have the kind of explainability of those systems. So we don't use black box neural networks in our systems, and that's why, right? So, but I do understand that the efficacy of those systems might lend a lot of people to go down that route. And that's why a lot of people have gone down that route. So we just kind of have to be careful when we choose to integrate these systems into our universities and within higher education and schools and all other educational establishments, that we have that concept of working in tandem with technology rather than just chucking it in there and expecting it to fix all of our problems right away, because that's unrealistic.
Thanks, Manjinder. That is very appropriate. And then I'd like to go to Ramkumar because I want to comment on the two types of learning. And then I would also like to talk to see Dr. Rija, who is here. She teaches computer science. So there have been a lot of comments made about transparency, the underlying logic, underlying algorithms. Okay? And there are a few other points that have been raised in the chat. I'll come to them in sequentially. And then we also have a couple of administrators here, Dr. Kishan Reddy and Santosh Kanekar, who are administrators of higher education institutions. So there have been a lot of points that have been made regarding the administration, the governance and regulation, both at the state level, and some of them have explained it at that level. So I want to go to that. So there are a sequence of items. So first I will want to go to Ramkumar and see if he has a comment on the point that Shantanu made about this distinction between I can produce a good answer, but I've not really learned it or internalizing it and being able to answer it. So what does that do and the dynamics of that one, because you're studying it, Ramkumar? Then I'll come to Dr. Rija. Ramkumar, you have a comment on that one?
Yeah, so thank you. I think there are two things in that. When students learning, they understand the procedural knowledge and conceptual knowledge. Some students, when they read multiple times, for example, if the student is trying to read a concept and trying to answer a set of questions to answer it, and if he's not able to answer, system can recommend the student to go back and read again the same concept. By doing that, the students will get a feeling of familiarity, not feeling of knowing. So feeling of knowing is very important, but by reading it, student get a feeling of familiarity, able to tell it, but is still not understood it. So the procedural knowledge is clear, but the conceptual knowledge, whether they're able to understand and apply that knowledge into a new, new domain or new transfer knowledge to some other problem, that is not there. To do that, we need, conceptual questions. One of our studies, what we did, we ran a questionnaire to understand students' mindset. It's a Carol Dweck's just 3 simple questions to understand the mindset. It's a fixed mindset and growth mindset. And we asked the students to learn computer programming, basically Python programming in the web-based systems. We collected all the interactions, their reading time, what they're reading, or the highlights, the compilers, and every detail. And it is surprising that the fixed mindset students go there and they do well compared to growth mindset students, because fixed mindset students never wanted to learn completely. When they go to the problem, they try to solve, they're not going back and reading. If it is wrong, again, trying to solve again and again. That is the way we learn programming, basically. Whereas the growth mindset students, when they say wrong, they go back, learn the concept and come back. So fixed mindset students really did good in the task and they scored well immediately in the post-test. But when we did a retention test after a week on the conceptual understanding, the students were not able to answer well, the fixed mindset students. So yeah, the learning is 2 types. And we should have the only answer to is trying to come up with a fantastic assessment to measure the students' knowledge, not just personal knowledge, the conceptual knowledge, or are they able to apply it? And are they able to retain it for several weeks? These are the key. It's not just teaching, the assessment is the key. So yeah, that's my comment. Again, coming to the trust issues, when we collect data in the systems like mindset, we don't want to provide a feedback saying that, hey, you are fixed mindset, you should go and do this. Instead, fixed mindset students always wanted to be in the top in the dashboard. So what we do when fixed mindset students interacting is not going back to reading the content. We tell them, if you read a content, I'll give you 3 stars. No, the student is interested to go and read the content, get a 3 stars to complete dashboard. So that's what we try to do. So yeah.
Thanks, Ramkumar. That is very insightful. Helen saying, I do not think I can see other people's comments in the chat.
I just think point here, just a small extension on this. In the designing these systems, given we have this learner base, which is the student higher education learner base, and we have a corporate learner, right? Two very different types. Corporate learner typically wants to solve a problem because he's learning in the flow of work more likely and then wants to get an outcome. Whereas the student is more, what we're trying to do is to improve his learnability, right? So, so in the context of designing an AI system, which is a learner experience driven, one of the concepts that we are working with around is, in the student community, think of the best teachers that we have typically are minimally helpful, right? And then they let the student go through the process of discovery and then go through the process of becoming, the learning process improves as the minimally helpful teacher lets them go through that cycle of learning. So putting a learning experience platform, which is in that context, designed around a student mindset to be minimally helpful so that his learning process is not fully solved. Like Shantanu said, he has a problem with English, he goes to ChatGPT, which is the maximally helpful system, takes the entire outcome and then puts it out here. But give him the nudges that takes him through that process so that the learning outcome finally is impactful, right? So it's again goes back to the designing and, what are you trying to achieve and what are the objectives that you want to do? What capability you want to surface, with using AI, right? Underlying piece of code is what will probably determine what the outcome of that design element is, right? So just a view there in the context of students versus learners, right? So.
That was very interesting. I think I like the way the discussion is going. We're going from the micro to the macro, from the particular person to the institutional level. What I would like to do is to sort of next go to Rija, who is a computer science faculty member, okay, and take her perspective. Then after that, I want to go to the sort of the two administrators and also a marketer of technology to get a macro perspective. Santosh and Kishan are in the administration of universities or higher education. And Suchitra is a technology marketer sort of a thing. So these are the people that are left. And then I want to throw it open for discussion on a number of data. Like Gopal has brought up the issue of data, which is central to it. We're all talking of collecting very large volumes of data, but there is all sorts of issues. And like, Ramkumar's comments were made on the data that they're collecting from the students. And the learning from it, the question of transferability of it, and all those types of things come up sort of, and data has become a very hot issue. So I'll go to that one. So that is the sequence I'm thinking of. First, Rija, would you like to comment on the discussions that have been taking place?
Thank you, sir. I want to add I'm agreeing with Ramkumar sir, what he told, like there are two ways of learning. But when we are teaching artificial intelligence course to students, if you will give some questions to students, what the students are doing means now they are searching the answers in ChatGPT. Whichever type of question we are giving, if it is scenario based or any type question, they will be submitting it, the answers. So it's a tedious task even for a faculty to search for a correct answer, because we cannot believe always ChatGPT will give better answer. So when we are designing a system, we should get feedback from students, faculty members, and we should collect the input about the concerned team. So what they would like to see is from their systems. So these steps will be often overlooked because it is messy and can lead to some controversy, but it's generally create better result in the long run. So we have to check majorly what will be the outcome in terms of efficiency, in terms of distribution, and in terms of positive as well as negative outcomes. This is what funding.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Rija. As a faculty member, there is a point that you reinforces some of the points that Shantanu and Ramkumar have mentioned. But let me go to a next level of sort of university administrators. I think Gopal also comes into the same category here in the panel here. But Gopal has already spoken a lot about the Manipal experience. But Santosh and Kishan Reddy, you have any comments on these discussions as an ex-senior level administrator in higher education in India?
Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm sorry I can't get my video functional, but as a former vice chancellor of a university, as a AICT advisor, my comments are the following. for any new sort of a impetus in the higher education system, there will always be a resistance from the stakeholders such as the UGC, AICTE, the state government.
Just a second, Kishan Reddy. For those of you that are not familiar, because we have international group, UGC is these are Indian acronyms. UGC is the University Grant Regulatory Bodies. UGC is the University Grants Commission. AICTE is the regulatory body for technical education. Okay, and so these are the labels that Kishan Reddy is using. Go ahead, Kishan. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't elaborate on the full forms of the statutory bodies in India. So there will be resistance initially, and also we have to convince the stakeholders that usage of AI systems in higher education is useful, progressive, and most importantly, doesn't eat up their jobs. And I mean, it's definitely helping in students learning better coding and programming and writing better English communication skills. But then my fundamental issue is intuition versus tuition. Up to a point, tuition is good, but then your intuition also should be up and going about. So I think you have to give a leeway to both. That the kid has to learn and sometimes figure things out for himself. And if everything is tuition, then his own intelligence won't come into picture. So I think both of them are important. And in professional education, such as engineering, I think learning by doing is important. If there are some interventions in learning by doing aspects, that will be useful. And from my own experience for the past 35 years as a teacher and an administrator, I think issues such as a service in the functions, teaching, learning, assessment, evaluation. I think assessment and evaluation, that will be viewed with a lot of skepticism because they don't want a gizmo telling them what needs to be the marks. Or maybe service and maybe administration, fine. That, you know, that trust has to be developed in order for it to be imbibed by the education system. These are some of my thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Kishan. Santosh, you want to comment as an administrator?
Yes, I also feel that we should. So I have a couple of comments. One is, as an administrator, I would say that as an education institution which teaches AI, we have to embrace AI. And while Balas, I think, made the right point that inevitable is not a word we should use along with technology and always ask whether we need the technology or not. But coming from an education institution, if we are teaching AI, we need to embrace AI, at least in terms of what is the use case and not the use case of it. That's one. Two is, I think, the conversation I still feel is still operating within the zone of generative AI and ChatGPT. There's much more to AI beyond ChatGPT, and I think somewhere, don't mind my saying, but we are, and this is what concerns me. As a student of communication and persuasion, I see that today we live in a world where, if you look at attention, today most of the attention of people is either in gaming, streaming, or social media, right? That's what occupies people beyond the work that people are doing, whatever that work definition is. And so the rapid adoption of a particular medium becomes a pathway of trust. What I mean by that is, I come from a generation when search engines had just started, right? Ask Jeeves and things like that. And today Google is absolutely prevalent to the point that it has become a verb, right? People say, Google it. And if you, like you rightly started off by saying that if you ask somebody, why do you believe it? It says that it has come on Google. I searched Google, Google says it, right? That's how people use. But language is an indication of what's happening in the mind. Today, for example, if something comes on WhatsApp or Messenger, people believe it is true, which means that in common parlance, pathway to trust is the widespread adoption of what is being used. And that's why ChatGPT and all the conversations that we are having But the point I'm saying is that today AI is powering many of the things which has become a pathway to trust. For example, maps, Google Maps, for example, is powered by AI. And people blindly follow the map and they don't question whether this map is actually the territory or not. So one is we have to realize that this is the neural model on which people are operating. And hence, as an educational institution, what builds trust for a student is, interestingly today, how fast it adopts technologies. And if you do not adopt technologies, then somewhere you are seen as somebody who's a laggard. And hence, I think there's a lot of pressure on it. And related to, I think, Bala's point is, we don't talk about this much, but when we say, for example, trustworthiness, the point which he raised, I think the burning question also is who decides trustworthiness? And that's what concerns me, that because today the ones who are generating the AI models themselves have put themselves in a position of saying, I will decide what is trustworthy and what is reliable or not. So that is one thing. And the second thing is, there is this hidden dimension of ethics, right? Which is, while some parts of the ethics are visible in the sense of saying data privacy. If I'm collecting data, I should recognize the ability of the person to say, I don't want to participate in this data gathering exercise. But is ethics as a topic only within that box? Or because unless we address the issue of ethics, the discussion of trust will always be governed by the people who are designing the models. So I will just end by saying that as an educational institution, we need to create our own AI models and not rely on corporates to create their own AI models. And two is, whether the discussion involves ethics or not, the educational institution has to be on the forefront of having that conversations around ethics, because only then we can build trustworthiness on whatever we are propagating, is my opinion on that.
Thanks, Santosh. I think those are important points. We'll come to especially the question of ethics and the institutions building their own model, the localized model sort of a thing. But I have one more person that I would like to give an opportunity to speak, and then we will come to a broader topics of discussion in the last few minutes, the last 25-30 minutes that are left. Suchitra, you are a technology marketer. I think that's your label. Now, can you speak from the point of view of the technology marketer in terms of the issues that have been raised? How do you generate institutional trust? How do you generate individual trust? Sort of a thing. But at the same time, there is often a skepticism of corporations that have been expressed, and rightly so, in terms of their interests are different from the educational institution's interest. Okay, and how do we bring those two together? Would you like to comment on that, Suchitra?
Yes. Thank you, Ram. Firstly, I think a plethora of some very interesting views shared today. I have been taking some notes and learning in the process, so thank you to everyone. I'm going to bring in a few perspectives that I have gathered over my experience, through my experience of dealing with educational institutions like Atria, and there are many more in the country that are really almost stalwarts of adopting technology at their own level and really believing in what it can do in terms of game changing for education, right? And the second is in my interactions with edtech organizations that actually work extensively in the education space, relying on the foundation of technology. So therefore creating a lot of intuitive, intelligent technology and solutions to solve problems in the education space, right? So firstly, taking a step back, see, AI, as we all know very well, has been prevalent for over a decade or more now, right? What's happened recently and why it's become the talk of the town is because it's landed in the hands of you and me as individuals and not really restricted to organizations and people with position and capability and responsibility from an organizational standpoint to use it. Otherwise, it's always been prevalent in the area of whether it's marketing, whether it's design, website layouts, recommendations to purchase. It's been everywhere and it's been guiding our lives beyond recommendations, right? Today, what's happened is there's almost been provided a UI for AI. and it's landed in our hands, which is why it's brought us to the threshold of ethics and trust and the right usage and all of this, rightfully so. And that's why we're seeing kind of this need around building the much needed governance, right? Taking a step back, as you rightly pointed out, at Microsoft, yes, we're having a lot of conversations around AI and how it can be in a very relevant fashion brought to work for our education stakeholders. And I will bucket the usage of solutions that are being asked for in two broad buckets, right? One is in the area of intelligence and information, whether you talk about chatbots, which are playing the role of level 1 query handling for students before professors and experts are brought into the fray, or whether we are talking about personalized adaptive learning, which has been around not just in the higher education space, but in the K-12 space, where learning is adaptive based on the capability, the performance of the child. And that is how more pertinent learning is kind of been put into space and put in the hands of children and teachers. This comes in the bucket of intelligence and information. We spoke a lot about ChatGPT, and by the way, along with it is co-pilots. This comes in the second bucket of productivity, and it should be treated that way. Today, ChatGPT and co-pilots like personal assistants are really made to remove the drudgery out of work, whether it's for our teachers, for our administrators, for our academicians. And that's the way it needs to be treated. It cannot become a source of research without proper, references and bibliographies and all of that, right? So it's very important to distinguish as we're getting slowly but surely mature in the use of AI as to what solutions and tools are built for what objectives and purpose. My third point that I wanted to really, touch upon is in our organization at Microsoft, and I'm sure in all of the organizations that deal with AI and sell solutions and build solutions around AI, it's very important to understand the concept of responsible AI. And to that extent, what we're being taught is to treat AI something like privacy and security. No organization can come up and say, hey, I'm foolproof. You know what? Just close your eyes and use me. Right? That's not the way security is handled today. Security is everyone's responsibility. The users, the providers, and everyone in between. AI should be treated exactly like that, where we must be open about the limitations that AI models can kind of inherently have or can cause. And we should always look at our AI solutions built around AI with some level of, what could be limitations. Someone spoke about growth mindset. I'll almost attribute it to with a growth mindset, saying, hey, we're here to take feedback and improve in the process. There's a learning curve that's out there. Having said that, this is still powerful technology that is now kind of slowly getting unleashed, and therefore we're all figuring out how to kind of deal with it, right? So these are the 3 points that I'd like to kind of, bring out in the broader context of really working as a marketer in technology. I hope that helps.
Thanks. That was very good, Suchitra. So now we have about 24 minutes left of the scheduled time. What I'd like to do is to push the discussion to an aggregate level from a lot of the issues. We have covered a lot of the macro to the micro issues. So starting from the top, we have talked about the integration of, yes? Anupam?
I'd just like to interject with a question from the audience.
Okay.
So the question goes, how does general trust, like say between a student and a faculty, change with AI in the picture?
Okay. How does the general trust between a student and a faculty change with AI in the picture? Would somebody like to respond to that one?
I did make a comment on there, right? I guess it probably starts with the professors accepting the fact that this is not going to go away, and you wish this wasn't there, right? I think it probably starts with that first acceptance from the teaching community. Second, then build your guardrails around what is it to be used for. Tell the students this is what is the do and this is what is the don't. Once you do that and give them that power of that new technology, and then tell them this is how and where you use, I think the rest of the trust will be built around that. But negating the inevitability of the usage is not going to help, right? So I guess a lot of the banning at Gen AI in the campus network is not going to help. They will go somewhere else, right? So I guess it has to be a far more constructive discussion in the context of what outcome are you trying to do? How can I help my students' learnability to improve, and how does the power of AI come into his daily life, right? So it will probably have to begin with that. To me, that's fundamental. Today, a lot of the deniability is where the issue is. If you stop with the deniability and start with the engagement, you'll probably find the trust building up.
Thanks. That was good. Shantanu, you have thoughts on this, because you mentioned this ambivalence when the student comes with a report that is written very well written, but is beyond the essential capability, but it is very well written.
Yeah, so I think, my underlying working philosophy at the moment is that I want students to be able to perform with and without various elements. So I test them in all possible cases. So when somebody comes to me with something that's written by ChatGPT, or I suspect, I give them a piece of paper and ask them to rewrite the same thing. Not one has been able to rewrite it at any basic kind of level. And then I tell them that the AI is not the problem. Eventually what will happen is we live in a society with a whole variety of technology that we coexist with, and how we use them productively is kind of really the issue. But my philosophy of education is that you have to be able to perform autonomously. What will you do when you don't have a machine, your battery is out or whatever, right? And that's a hard conversation to have, because human beings, when they're given something that's very easy, tend to gravitate towards that. And a lot of education is not about ease. A lot of education is really, it hurts your head. You have to struggle through concepts that don't come very easily. And how do I implement these kind of ideas? So the one thing I've done in my own courses is that I don't ban things. I ban them for a day and I reintroduce them the next day. Then I ban them again. And this is to show them their differences in their own behavior, their own engagement, their own performance with and without technology. And more than one student has come back to me and said, would you lock up not just our cell phones, but also our laptops? And I said, why don't you do it yourself? They said, we want to, but we can't bring ourselves to. And these are real examples. And so, ultimately, I think, again, I could completely be wrong. It could be that these technologies are going to be extremely destructive, or it could be these technologies are going to be so banal that we are worried about something, like akin to what Dulles said, akin to the browser. But I do feel that as an individual student, they have to be able to, brainstorm with themselves, like, what is this technology doing to me? How do I perform with it? How do I perform without it? And then take very, very informed decisions. Right now, people are gravitating to what's easy on the student end. And on the corporate end, I imagine people are gravitating is what will help them scale, faster.
Thanks, Shantanu.
Yeah, sure.
Ramkumar, you have any comment on this before I go to the next topic? Next, sort of wrapping up last 20 minutes. Ramkumar?
I think I'm here. I'm sorry. I think I agree. I don't have much comments now.
Thank you. I think we have had a very good discussion. There are few sort of tensions, not in a negative sense, that have cropped up, that have brought up in this discussion. What I would like to do is, at least for this session, in terms of going towards the last part of it, I'd like to bring these up and talk about them. And then probably we can think of a continuing session later on, a subsequent session, which will follow up on some of these things. One is the whole issue of the trust, ethics, those types of things that have come up sort of. Okay. And in the trust ethics continuum, there is also the issue that has come up in terms of the educational institutions, what is the role, So Ballas put the education institution roles not just in the now and the student, but in terms of generations and centuries, in terms of saying, what is the role of higher education? Versus the corporations sort of a thing that have a private sector, the investors' interest in it in terms of making the returns on investment. Both are in some sense necessary, both are facts of life, but as in higher education institutions, we have a certain ethical responsibility, we have a certain academic responsibility, and we have to respond to that one. At the same time, some of the developments are being made by the investors who have a profit motive, and they have their own interest in advancing it, and we have to deal with it. So we need to resolve that. We need not resolve the tension. We need to be cognizant of the tension. And then we also need to be cognizant of the tension between the individual and the institutional type of a thing. Okay. In terms of the individual students, they may find it easy, as Shantanu said, to just adopt something, get an answer, give me a grade, I want to move on. But the institution is saying, no, we are a learning institution. You have to demonstrate that you have actually learned and internalized it, and you have to move on. And we have to certify that you have done that. So these are some of the issues that are coming up in the course of this discussion. So I would like to go to Christoph, who has written Ballas, you want to say something? And then I'll go to Christoph, who has written a paper on ethics, and then we'll come to the other people also who have comments on this. Ballas, you want to say something?
I'm happy to go later. I'm really curious what Christoph has to say first.
Okay, I just was going to Christoph because I read his paper on ethics. So I thought he may have a comment on that one, and I'll go to Ballas after that. Christoph, you have a comment on the whole. It is not a straightforward ethics issue sort of a thing. It's the whole adoption, use, how we do it, and it has to be done ethically, being true to the spirit of higher education, at the same time being responsive to the needs of the recruitment and the industry and so on and so forth. So you have any comments on this, Christoph?
Yeah, just a brief, very brief comment. I would say, and I want to just pick up the very last point that you just made about the recruitment into industry. I think one of the real big duties of higher education as a system really is to prepare folks who are going into AI in any kind of capacity, to prepare them or equip them properly to be, with discernment, I would say, and a sharp, sense of, in terms of even in terms of those categories. I think your framework is really good, that this kind of ontology that you put out there before, to kind of give people those kinds of frames of reference to actually go into industry and go into this sort of next generation, because that's really where we found a lot of issues there, where it's not so much, yes, the corporate money and so on, but like it is like, I think, I'm not sure if this was Boda who said that, but it goes down to the individual responsibility as well. But how can you have responsibility if you don't have the categories to work with and sort of this kind of equipment? So I would say that's a really big task as well for higher education systems.
Thank you, Christoph. Ballas, you had a comment, and after that, I want to make a quick comment on the ethics and the individual things and the pressure of the modern society. Yes, Ballas, you want to make a comment?
Yes, about the role of ethics and the ethics discussion in this space. I would like to draw the attention of the fact that there is a political economy of regulation across the globe. In the US, it's very difficult to actually think in terms of regulatory oversight and new laws coming in, creating strong rearguards and frameworks around new technologies. There are many reasons for that. The traditional liberal US approach to regulation, the political gridlock in Washington, et cetera, et cetera. In those environments, the second best option is to rely on ethics as a framework which distinguishes right from wrong. But it's also a discursive and political tool in terms of the industries that are to be regulated to escape regulation and say, hey, we don't need regulation, we need an ethics discussion on that, which is very nice because it spells out a normative framework without actually enforcement mechanisms, right? In Europe, we regulate the hell out of it, right? And instead of relying on ethical frameworks to think about what is right and wrong in terms of technology use and implementation, there's going to be an AI Act with some teeth in it, and I think that's an alternative to the ethics discussion, in a sense that that it shortcuts many of the questions and delegates the ethical discourse to, I think, a place where it serves, it has a better purpose. We have ethics review committees which assess research plans on a case-by-case basis, right? And that is where the ethics assessment needs to happen on a case-by-case basis, closest to the application, closest to the humans, closest to the potential harm, closest to the risk. These large-scale ethics of AI discussions, I'm afraid they can be very. I'm not saying that they are completely useless, but I'm also saying that we should be very cautious about not to replace the regulatory discourse with an ethics discourse.
But you're saying that the ethics discussion should be particularized. Sort of, you can't. It's good to have a high-level philosophical discussion, but it is almost like the human subjects committee that reviews your research proposal before you can, before they approve the questions that you can ask and the data that you can collect. Similarly, what you're saying is, if I might draw an analogy, we need to have a review of use of some systems in the context of a certain pedagogy, certain teaching, and what does it do and what does not. Am I right? Am I understanding you correctly? Thank you,
yes, because I think it's a very different use of AI in a computer science course on sorting algorithms than in medical diagnostics. That's
okay. Shantanu, you're nodding your head. It looks like you agree with something. So you want to add to that, or you want to verbalize it and tell us what you're thinking.
I tend to fidget a lot. That, I'm not nodding my head in response to anything, but I did like hearing what the commentators are saying. And come back to this at the end of it.
Helen, you are. Sorry, go ahead.
I have an art. It's not. Do not read too much into me. Kind of, moving in my chair. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Oh no, that is fine. I'm just trying to be sensitive to nonverbal cues too, because trying to keep everybody in track. And Helen, Balas made a good point about monitoring at the local level versus the institutional level, the difference in the regulatory environment between the United States and Europe, and also India, sort of thing. You have any comments on that? You are anchored in the United States.
Yeah, so I just put a comment as well about the regulations that I've been working with the United Nations, and looking at what we have at the moment was very little as of about 2 months ago, very little globally. I'm in the US, from Europe, from the UK, but small little pockets. The problem with these regulations is it's like a moving target, although I think we're getting to a place now where we actually can put things in place, but the United Nations are kind of putting global ones that are very overarching, but each country, I think, do need to be more specific, because each context is very different and has little nuances. So did that answer your question? Did I put a comment earlier? Did you say? I don't remember one.
No, the question was, I think if I were to extend Bala's point, it's almost like in the United States, I have taught in the United States, when you have to submit a course for approval, either to the various committees, you have to submit a tentative syllabus and the pedagogy and the course content. And one would expect that you would submit in terms of the pedagogy, how you're going to integrate AI into that if you want to do that. Okay. And then the approval process would take into consideration whether the ethics of it, the rightness of it, and so on and so forth. So what I'm thinking of is a process analogous to the ethics committee for research, which controls what questions I can ask, what data I can collect, and how do I maintain the privacy, confidentiality, and anonymity of the data. Okay. So would that be the type of system that needs to be introduced in order to protect both the students' interest and the faculty interest and the learning interest? Okay? So I think that would be very onerous. And if I go back to an earlier comment, faculty are overloaded. They may be reluctant to adopt it.
Okay.
But at the same time, is it a necessary thing? Okay. So you have a last comment on that, Helen?
Yes, well, faculty do need support, so they need support from other aspects of the universities to help do that. Because like you said,
Okay.
they are very much overloaded, but it's a necessary thing that we have to look, and these ethics groups as well are having to make decisions, and quite often those in those ethics groups and lack the understanding of artificial intelligence and what it does, and they're just kind of trying to catch up. So it's a very difficult process of people trying to catch up.
No, it is a very onerous process. If anybody has gone through the ethics approval for research, even for a simple questionnaire, that the challenges of doing it. Okay. So Ramkumar, you're smiling. I don't know whether I'm reading too much into it. Do you have any comments on this?
Recently, we started doing the ethics approval committee within the Indian too. So in IITs, we used to have this thing. But the problem now is that whoever have the access to a lot of data, they are responsible to it. Now, if any issue of data leak happens, they come to PI because we are the access to all the data. So we are most responsible. Then we have to anonymize every data, including facial expressions, all the data to the students. That is the current scenario in the Institute Research Board. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead. Now, this brings us to a point. I think Gopal made a point, but I also want to bring up another point that has come. I think this is an intersection of this. And that is, in some sense, the tension between the individual, the institution, and the corporation sort of. AI systems depend upon very large databases for in order to be effective, right? But at the same time, as Ramkumar pointed out, even at the local level, there is a considerable amount of load in terms of maintaining the privacy, confidentiality, and anonymity of the data. And there is also all sorts of issues about the ownership of the data and those types of things. And then, as earlier pointed out, also one of the ways to increase trust is to have institution-based AI systems versus corporate AI systems. All right. All these things brings us to the question, like Gopal earlier mentioned, that they have developed their own system for the medical education, okay, which is based on internal data, all right, and the data that they have collected. And the data that they have collected must be large, but not large enough in the sense of if you take 10 medical colleges, you have even more data. And there is also the temptation that if you agglomerate 10 medical colleges, you can monetize the data, or you can monetize the findings from the data. And there is also that incentive to say that we can go ahead and monetize it. So where does the role of the institution come in this? Now, in terms of how does an higher education institution manage these pressures in terms of, Santosh, you said that your job is to advance AI because you are into computer science business. But at the same time, how do you resolve the different tensions between the individual, the institution, and the corporation? At the same time, the necessity of like the large data versus the small data and those types of things. Do you have any thoughts on this? There's Christoph also has hands raised. Gopal has hands raised. I'll go to Santosh, then come to Christoph, and then come to Gopal. Okay. Okay, Santosh, go ahead. Santosh.
It's a very valid question, and hence again, where I started off this entire discussion was that we need to play a statesmanly role so that all education institutions can come together and find solutions which are not necessarily serving a particular section of the society. And what I mean by that is, today we live in what I call as the upgrade society. What that means is that every year you are forced to upgrade something, like your phone, right? Every 2 years with software patches, you have to upgrade it, right? Your computer system has to get upgraded every 4 years. And somebody has decided that your machine is no longer relevant, right? And I think the starkest case of that was the entire vaccine thing which happened around the globe, is that we had to upgrade our body because there were certain things, and then there is upgrade 4 and upgrade 4.2 and upgrade 4.5. And without taking any right or wrong positions on it, if you see the common strand running across all of them is the use of fear. And this has been going on from Y2K times. that if you don't do this, everything will come to a halt. And then the ultimate was, if you don't do this, you will die, right? And I think I'm going to connect this to Balza's point about ChatGPT. ChatGPT hallucinates. So what is the solution for it? Take the paid version of GPT-4. So we are now in this upgrade society where errors are solved by paying more money, and then every year or every 2 years you keep paying money. And I'm saying as an education institution, we need an opt-out. Just like GPDR allows you to say, I don't agree to these cookies, so I'm going to opt out of that, but still have access to what you're giving to me. Versus the current system where if you don't agree to my rules, you cannot get access to the system at all. So for example, Google. Before ChatGPT, everybody was using Google, right? Now that algorithm by its own commercial interest makes sure that there is only certain kind of information people get to see. And then there are biases based upon your search history. So the point I'm coming to is that with AI models, where it's not only the large data which is the need, but even more insidious is the labeling of the data, right? So, and what are the heuristics on the basis of which that data is being labeled is something nobody talks about. So for an education institution, it's very important that we collaborate amongst us and create our own data sets, our own AI models, our own transformers, such that we at least have sight to the labeling heuristics which are happening there. And this, we might feel right now that, oh, it's not really such a big deal, but it is a very, very big deal, because the entire AI engine is running on the kind of labeling which is happening, or the heuristics on which it is running. And unless we don't arrest it right now, we will willy-nilly land up in an upgrade society again, where the education institution will have to go by the rules which are defined by somebody else. So my answer to this is yes, there has to be a collaborative effort across educational institutions on having its own AI models, which gives a better pathway to trust.
Thank you, Santosh. We're almost running to the end of the session, so I'll quickly go to Christoph and Gopal, and then sort of they had their hands raised. And after that, wrap it up in a couple of minutes, so we may go about 5 minutes beyond the scheduled time. So I hope you bear with me on that one. Christoph, you had a point to make?
Yeah, a quick response also to Santosh. I mean, the whole labeling issue that he mentions, of course, is super important, but that forms a really big part of the ethics debate, right? So that's a huge field of debate and research in AI ethics. What the other piece I wanted to just kind of reinforce is, and what I kind of take away also from this, by the way, really great webinar, is that we're seeing a little bit of this tension between, or like you said before, positive tension, I guess, between the small scale, the local scale, and then sort of the overarching piece, whether it's policy on a national level, and even on an international level, between institutions of higher education, maybe education systems in the country, and then really the pragmatics on the ground, down to the individual student and the individual person. So I think this vertical kind of integration seems to me one of those topics that are, I think, quite important and not trivial to treat. So, and I feel that this is something where these kinds of formats here are actually very, very helpful, because we have folks from all kind of all positions in that vertical. And so yeah, I just want to commend you for organizing this in this way, because that's the discussion we need to have, I believe. So I would look forward to follow up here. Thank you.
Thanks, Christoph. Gopal?
Yeah,
you're the last word. Well, I'll have the last word, but you're the last word as panelist.
Sure. So the point I was trying to make on data is that in the higher education system, in India, of course, and probably I suspect in other countries, there is an issue with student data. First of all, it's not longitudinal. The applications for the system for getting applications is very different from the system that is used for the student lifecycle management. And once the student graduates, while there are some alumni systems, you're very unlikely to track the student through their course. So there is no longitudinal data. So if you really want to make AI work in terms of how a student is formed, what are they doing afterwards, what have their outcomes been, it's a challenge. So that's the point I was trying to make, that there is an issue with data systems, and that's something we got to look at solving, and that will probably address Santosh's point. If you're able to do that, then we can create more models which will be applicable to the Indian context. So there's a bunch of things that we could do. I also want to quickly say that in research, we have not talked about research, because the faculty for them research, we've been talking about ChatGPT, but there is knowledge graphs today, which is another form of AI. For example, in life sciences, there's a knowledge graph, and the ontology there uses 40 million terms, right, specifically for healthcare and knowledge. And that is now being made available to universities for research purposes. So this knowledge graph consists of journals, of course, but beyond that, congresses, all the congresses in life sciences that have been held in the last 20 years, it consists of all the clinical studies that have happened over the last 20, 30 years. So all the data is coming in, and it's making connections. So knowledge graph is different from ChatGPT because it's making connections. So it's very, very powerful from a research perspective. So I think that is a big advantage in higher education, especially in countries like India, where we need to bring our research quotient up. I think AI is going to have a tremendous impact. So with that, I'll stop.
I think there's a wonderful place to stop. There's a tremendous amount of potential, but the potential has to be harnessed carefully. I think there is a tremendous amount of potential for globalization of knowledge on a scale, at the level that it has not been possible in the past, going back to centuries of universities that brothers talk about. But at the same time, it has to be done carefully because there could be resistance. There is this issue of localization, globalization, institutionalization, protection, all those things. This has been a wonderful webinar. Thank you very much for taking the time and participating with us. I just want to take a couple of minutes to let you know what our plan is in terms of the next steps. There will be a report on this one that we will share with all of you, and that will sort of summarize some of the discussions that we have had in the context of the framework. And hopefully later on, as we build upon these topics, some of us will work on this and get publications out of this. But more important, I think Santosh mentioned earlier when we were designing this one, that should be part of a series of webinars. I think there is enough material, there's enough grist here to continue this discussion. Okay. I hope that many of you have, all of you, or actually all of you have found this interesting enough to respond to our invitation the next time and say that you would like to engage with us and discuss with us. I think this has been a multinational forum or an international forum, interdisciplinary forum. And as Gopal pointed out, we have had a forum in which we have had people at all the levels of the stakeholders. We just have not had students, but we have teachers, we have researchers, we have administrators, we have regulators that have been so. So I think it has been very insightful, but there's a lot of ground to cover. So with that, unless somebody has any final comment to make, I will wrap this up and say thanks to all of you, the participants that are here and the many observers that are there. Does anybody want to say anything to wrap up? Any other final comments?
I just want to say again on behalf of Atria Education, it's been a fantastic webinar. Thank you, Ram sir, for really taking the initiative on this, and it's only because of your intellectual heft and you being there, we managed to have this great conversation. Thank you to all the speakers. I really respect all of your time to come out and have spent more than 2 hours on this. I know we are all going back very intellectually stimulated. The proof of the pudding will obviously remain in what are the actions that we take in our individual spaces, however small they are, to make sure that the conversations that we had here really come to life in their own way. So I also look forward to engaging with all of you on LinkedIn and personally, if possible, whenever we can. I also want to thank Anupama for her relentless energy in making sure that this happens and reaching out to everybody, to Hazel and Abhishek, the silent people in the background who have been making sure that these happens. I look forward to a time and place when we can hopefully all physically meet and really take it to the next level. So thank you so much, and over to you, Anupama and Ramsey.
A warm thank you to everyone and for being so responsive to the emails that I sent at really short notice. Again, we hope to keep this momentum going, and we hope it gathers speed and takes tangible shape in various ways. Thank you once again.
Christoph and then
You,
Shantanu.
Anupama.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll
guys.
come to you. Christoph, Shantanu, and then Dallas. Yeah. Christoph, you wanted to say something?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to Anupama for pushing and making this happen. It always takes this energy to kind of get people together, and so that's super appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Shantanu?
Yeah, I just same thing. I wanted to say thank you to the organizers and all the speakers. It's been really stimulating. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Dallas had his hand raised, or was he just saying bye? So he has left, I think. So
No, he's here.
Dallas, did you?
Yes.
He's here, Dallas?
Same thing. I just wanted to compliment you for conducting this. I guess this was very well moderated and engaging for every one of us, even though it was 2 hours. Coming in in a 2-hour webinar, the ability to log in and log off is very high, but I don't think there was a second that anyone missed. So thank you. Very wonderfully done.
Thank you very much. So look forward to meeting you again, virtually or in person. Okay. Bye-bye for now. Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anupama, Hazel, Abhishek, if you can stay on, you can stop the recording now if you want. Ram sir, again, thank you very much. Very, very big heartfelt thank you to you.